to touch on the future of education, I guess we have to touch on kind of where it's at or where it's been. And so at the simplest level, our antiquated education system isn't moving as fast as either our psychology or our environmental world or the nature of work and how people are working and going to be working.
Here we are for another episode of the Freedom Culture Podcast. And my name is Julian Gudelai. I'm sitting here with my friend Jason Guille, who went with us to the Punta Mona Mastermind, one of the media creators, to plan and bond more on how to collaborate on epic media in the world and storytelling. And also now here at after Punta Mona here at Envision Festival in Costa Rica. Jason, such a pleasure to actually meet you in the jungle. We usually hang out in Victoria. Well, that's where we met at least.
Yeah, it's quite something to be here. Whole different world.
Is it your first time in Costa Rica?
First time in Central America, first time in a jungle.
Mm-hmm.
First time worrying about bullet ants and scorpions and vipers when I walk at night. It's totally different.
I love your answer, man. That's a great way to start and drop in. Yeah, Costa Rica certainly brings alive a very unique energy. Pura vida is something that's really being lived here, and that's really what I want to chat with you about, Jason Guille, because Jason, you are a host of community since a long time in British Columbia, actually in Canada, and I want to ask you about the hospitality that you perceive Costa Rica to have. Like, how did you feel welcomed into this country?
Yeah, I've only had kind of the two contexts here. So one being Punta Mona Village that we stayed at for a week, and then here at Envision Festival. Envision, I think, is largely curated by Westerners as much as locals. So maybe my experience here isn't reflective of Costa Rica as a whole. I'm not sure, but it's been great. People are wonderful and generous and lovely. Being to Punta Mona was really amazing. Just like seeing the community come together and work together, and their investment in each other and their gentle but present way with each other. Mm-hmm. Yeah, really beautiful.
Really cool. So, to give context around who you are, you started with a space called Sunset Labs, is that right? In Victoria, British Columbia?
I don't know about started, but but yeah, I've had Sunset Labs for over 10 years now, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What was the original intention of this space, the hosting of like culture and community to evolve? Like, what was the original intention behind that?
That space was kind of a funny confluence of moments and circumstance. It just kind of showed up, and so mostly we just started doing events there because we had a space, and I've always liked bringing people together. And so, it would be true to say I didn't have a really clear idea about what that space was about or what it was for. But then it kind of started to declare itself and take on a life of its own and refine through community what it was here for. And so as willful as I can be and as design focused as I often am, I've also just tried to listen to what the space requested and what the community asked for and create more of that.
So over the years, you've been exposed to plenty of dance parties, lots of live streaming events, lots of like educational talks. I guess also a lot of diversity. I think I know that I've personally had my first ever acupuncture session in your space with a mutual friend, Bradley Morris. Shout out to Bradley T. Morris, who was with us in Punta Mona. And I'm just curious because I know you're also a host a lot of men's work and the whole domain of just evolving and cultivating who we are as conscious beings and who we are in community and how we show up with each other. So in that context, I want to really ask you, what is freedom culture to you? What does freedom as a man in this reality, in this world mean to you?
I can't say that I've thought a lot about the word freedom prior to like arriving to this event. Like that word hasn't been a huge part of my vocabulary or kind of philosophic curiosities. But in thinking about it now, and in hearing some people share about it here at Envision. Freedom. The times when I notice that I'm feeling free is when I'm able to disentangle something that was artificial that was governing me. So often I'll have some sort of mindset or some belief system that is entrenched and that I hold to be true. And then one day I'll be, working with Gabor Mate or Stephen Jenkinson or Charles Eisenstein, and suddenly it'll just kind of like unravel. And suddenly there's like this weight that's gone and this constriction of artificial concept or artificial guidance mechanism that releases. Mm-hmm. And that's when I notice that I feel a lot of freedom energetically. And resultantly, I feel more free when I'm with somebody because I have less attachment or structured ideas about how we should connect, And so mostly like there's
no me without the we, really, right?
Yeah.
You need the relationship in the community, and therefore freedom within that interaction. Otherwise, there's not even a reality of self in that sense.
Yeah, and it's I think that the general arc of kind of growing up in today's world is slowly chipping away at the inauthentic belief systems and behavioral patterns that we've architected over decades.
Well, inauthentic in the sense, I guess, for me, very much because literally I would go to speak about consciousness, because things that have been decided 70 years ago were just agreements that were decided 70 years ago, were a different level of consciousness and informedness and ways of travel of not just information, but also of humans on the planet than now and today. So humans are changing and evolving in living out their diversity. And so our agreements and coming together, I think, need to be very open and flexible to that evolution.
Absolutely.
Cool. I think it's a pleasure to talk about freedom. As a German Canadian, I think it's also a very North American, US American thing, quite specifically,
The idea of freedom?
Just it being like a very core focus of its culture. Right? That freedom is part of the colonialization that kind of took over the prior native structures and ways and forms of living in such a diverse way. Where I want to focus in with you is really also on education, because you just spoke about how we grow up into this world. And I know you're a father. Your son is an adult now as well. And we've been in the community of Victoria, British Columbia as a large, and beyond that also, the two of us have been really like standing up and stepping into education as a change in the new education paradigm. So I want to ask you the question, like, how do you envision the future of education if you were to zoom out a bit and you can see 10, 20, 30, 40 years? Specifically interesting, because I want to set that context for the person listening. You're listening, Jason Guille runs a live streaming platform. So he's in the jungle right now in Costa Rica, bare feet on the ground, but at the same time he also has this technology wizardness that is in his being, right? So how do you see the future of education?
To touch on the future of education, I guess we have to touch on kind of where it's at or where it's been. And so at the simplest level, our antiquated education system isn't moving as fast as either our psychology or our environmental world or the nature of work and how people are working and going to be working, and certainly not moving as quickly as the world is changing environmentally, climate change, economics, and so on. And so there's a deficiency in the way that education is adapting to the emerging now. And so at the simplest level, I hope that education becomes more flexible and adaptive and responsible for the now that we're experiencing and for the now that we perceive coming. Clearly, things are moving so quickly and changing so quickly that education, as long as it focuses on content and kind of skill sets and aptitudes, and I think it's always going to fall behind really quickly. Mm-hmm. So what you and I have encountered in the education domains that we've been experiencing is that it focuses on ways of being and personal development skills and curiosity and inquiry and
inquiry,
these pathways that are trans capable. Anything that somebody steps into, those skills are still going to be available to them and relevant. And no matter what happens in the world operationally, they have a interpersonal and personal way of being, a skill set that can adapt to that reality.
Wow. So that's a mental framework or psychology in my way of interpreting it that really allows for freedom. Right? Like this is like loving someone into being so that they're actually equipped for freedom culture instead of just living freedom culture as a counter reaction to your oppressive or traumatic, like wounds in that sense. I guess also for all of our wounds and all of our trauma in 2019 that still is very real, privilege and inequality are something that yet have to really kind of unlock into a next synarchy or synergy, I believe. And, on that note, there is definitely already a lot of movement in the education revolution. I think we're maybe not in the middle of it quite yet, but places like the Green School exist and they are inspiring the entire world.
Oh yeah, alternative schools and inquiry-based schools are popping up all over the world, and there's definitely a huge global flowering of emerging education models. Driven by people like Phil Moore and Dr. Shafali and others who are stewarding...
Gene Houston
Yeah, absolutely. Who are
Ramdas, all these people are involved in this kind of value setting almost, right?
This broader way of learning. And a more inclusive, holistic, person-centered, heart-centered pathway of education. I'm excited to see where it goes, and I'm excited for that emergence to kind of displace... some of the dysfunctional historical models.
So much. I think what you're saying is so beautiful because as a 31-year-old, I still remember like yesterday how it felt like a child to grow up and wanting to voice not just my opinions, but also my desire, my actual back then innocent and authentic desire for how I'd like education to be. And that was only partially really in the German education system at the time, mid-90s to early 2000s, that wasn't necessarily being heard or fostered. Some other skills were much more of a priority. So I think a readiness for life or in asking really good questions is essential.
Yes.
Jason, as we're wrapping up this super micro episode, because you are also busy filming the entire stage all weekend long, I want to really acknowledge you for that amazing gift that you have to create media basically out of nothing. Is there anything else you'd like to share? And maybe something that made you smile in the last 3-4 days, or something you're grateful for?
Often I find in doing my work in the world that there's a little bit of an experience of isolation or loneliness, that there isn't a tight tribe of people doing epic deep work. And so here, as we gather with Freedom Culture and the Superhero Academy and I Am community, it is so compelling and resonant for me to be immersed in people that are kicking butt and doing really deep work in the world and really trying to push the boundaries of connection and expansion and consciousness.
Pushing boundaries.
And so I'm left kind of reaffirmed and feeling more settled in the global community of kind of change makers and movement creators. And so I guess, to others who may resonate with that feeling of isolation, I just encourage you to continue to, seek your tribe and connect with people, because there's a lot of people doing epic, creative, difference-making work in the world. And if you don't have access to that, it's going to be a lonely push. But if you can immerse yourself in people that are really trying to create and trying to make a difference and holding that space, it's so settling and grounding. And I'm finding for me, it just gives me a lot of power in moving forward with what I'm up to.
Beautiful. Very, very grateful for you sharing that. Staying continuously beyond hope, actually, at choosing optimism based on seeing how many epic humans there are alive. Jason, thank you so much for making the time.
My brother.
Love having you on the show.
Thank you, sir.